Hello, hello, and welcome. Hopefully, you all are not having any technical difficulties on your end. Thanks for joining us today. This is powered by the Trust. Let's talk destigmatizing mental illness. I got four great panelists that I want to introduce and not introduce. I want them to introduce themselves. So we will start with the first lady, April. April is a wife of a former player. April, can you give us a little background about you and your work in the mental illness space or mental health space? April, I think you're on mute. Can you all hear me? Okay, I'm gonna start again. My name is Cliff Crosby. I'm one of the captains with the Trust. I want to welcome you to the Trust, powered by the NFL Let's talk destigmatizing mental illness. As we know, this month of May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and I got four great panelists today with me, and I want to give them an opportunity to introduce themselves. So we'll start with Todrick. Todrick, tell us a little bit about your background and why this space is so important to you.
All right. First and foremost, I want to say thank you to the Trust for inviting me and allowing me to be a part of this talk. I definitely appreciate it. Something that
Uh-huh.
I chose to pursue after football was over. So my name is Todrick Devoe. I'm from Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I went to Board Anderson High School. After going to high school, I went to Central Missouri State, where I received my bachelor's in criminal justice. After that, I had the pleasure of playing for the Baltimore Ravens and the Denver Broncos for wide receiver. After that, I went back to school for the University of Missouri to pursue a career, my degree in school education and counseling psychology, because I felt as if in South Florida we was lacking in that area with people that look like me. So it was kind of personal. And as the conversation goes farther along, then I guess I can explain it a little more.
Absolutely, and I appreciate that. And I do have some bullet points that I want to get into some things with you later. Next, we have Marcus Smith the second. Don't forget the second. Marcus, tell us a little bit about yourself, brother, and give us a little background. And again, you don't got to go into everything because I got some good questions for you guys.
Okay. Well, first off, I'm Marcus Smith the second, like you said. I played 6 years in the NFL with the Eagles, Seahawks, and the Redskins. First and foremost, I want to say thank you guys for having me. And in the mental health world, I had my fifth season. I had a traumatic experience with myself when I was about to take my own life, and I stepped away from the game to get my mental together. That's when I really started to seek out therapy and seek out uh, things that would help me along with football. And I was actually able to go back to football the next year and finish the season out. And so that's kind of what brought me to mental health, and that's why I'm a huge mental health advocate now.
Wow, that's powerful. Marcus, thanks for sharing that, brother. I did not know that. You see your bio, but you ain't mentioned that. So that's important in your bio. So thanks for that nugget.
Yes,
Next,
sir.
we'll go to Miss April. How are you? We're going to try April one more time. April, I think you're on mute or take yourself off mute. But April, can you give us a little background of why you're here? Why it's important that some of us should hear from you as well? Because the last time I checked, you're not a former player, right, April?
No, sir, by no means. My name is April Jones, and my husband's name is James, and he played in the NFL for 11 seasons. And I'm a mother first, even before I'm a wife. I'm a mother. A mother of two, a grandmother of one, a stepmother of three, a step grandmother of two. I'm a college graduate with 3 degrees: accounting, business, and nursing. Um, And lastly, what brings me to this is that I am a motherless child now. So instead of having two biological kids, I only have one. James and I's son, he took his own life in September. It's only been 8 months. Um, Mental health is real. We're living in the truth of it.
Right.
It is something that you never get over. It is a sight that I will always have in my memory. Every morning I wake up, that's the sight that I have of our son hanging in our home. So I am a motherless child, and he refused to talk about it, as a lot of players, they refuse to talk about it. So with my husband being a former player, he's gone through a lot himself, and I've walked with him in that journey as well. So for me, this is real. It is real, as
Okay.
real as can get.
Okay. Well, April, I appreciate you sharing that, and we're going to get into some of that. And I don't want you. I want you to table that, but I am going to come back to that because I did not know that was part of your story. Y'all just continue to keep surprising me, right? So, Ryan, you are up next, sir. How are you doing? And thanks for joining us. And tell us a little bit about what brings you to this platform and want to talk about mental illness and talk to our former brothers, our sisters, as April just shared, some of the wives are on here as well. What brings you to the platform?
Yeah. So first and foremost, thank you for the opportunity to speak on this platform, and also condolences and thoughts and prayers to the Jones family. My name is Ryan Mundy, and I am a former NFL athlete. I played 8 years in the NFL, 5 in Pittsburgh. I'm originally from Pittsburgh as well. 1 in New York with the Giants, and then 2 in Chicago with the Bears. And I'm currently stationed in Chicago as well. My experience with mental health, much like I'm sure a lot of our brethren, that transition is very real. And albeit I was doing a lot of things externally to checking boxes around like getting my MBA, taking advantage of like these executive education programs, the list goes on and on. I've done a lot externally, but when the rubber was ready to meet the road for that transition internally, I was emotionally unprepared. I played football for 24 years in total, and dealing with the anxiety of figuring out what my next move was going to be, how was I going to support my family, the depression of not being in the locker room, not being around my brothers, not being in that routine that I've been in for 24 years. And then just the general identity issues of like, who am I when I'm not playing football anymore? There was a massive void in my life that needed to be filled up with other parts of my being. And I did not know how to fill them up as Ryan Mundy, the father, Ryan Mundy, the husband, and Ryan Mundy, the Black man. And when I went into the marketplace to search for solutions like support, etc., didn't find any.
Right.
And I had a really bad experience just with therapy in general. I went to like 4 or 5 therapists, and it did not work out or materialize. And ultimately, that led me to starting Alchemy Health. And Alchemy Health is principally focused on the health and well-being of the Black community, and we're rooting our mission in mental health. And we offer guided meditations, on-demand therapy modules, and live group therapy sessions on our platform. So that's a little bit about myself, but again, happy to be with you all today.
Well, we got a great panel with a well-versed background in mental health, whether it affected you personally, whether you've seen it affect loved ones and people around you. So we're going to jump right in. I got a couple of questions, and I don't have an order unless you all make me make an order. I will just throw out a question. If you feel like you want to tackle that question, you can. The first question is, and I'll start a little bit, the title, right? What does the term destigmatizing mental health mean to you? Anyone want to take that question? And I'll start, because I'm wearing a shirt today that says "Silence the Shame." If you don't know about that organization, it's a great organization, and they talk a little bit about this destigmatizing mental health. They talk a lot about being shameful of talking about mental health, especially in the Black community. We all know that our parents did not believe in going to therapy. If you talk to some of our parents, and I'm not sure if your parents are like my parents, but my mom will tell you, pray about it. Just pray. Go to church. Take it to God. Do this. Let it go. But even pastors today talk about therapy. And they talk about there are some things that are beneficial going to seek out therapy, going to better yourself and self-discovery. So have you guys seen in your own communities any destigmatizing or any situations where it's hard to have these mental health conversations in your own families and communities? Anybody want to talk about that?
Yeah, I could dive in. And you're spot on. Like, we are in the very early stages of destigmatizing mental health. Historically, particularly in our community, like, these issues were kept in the house, right? And you don't want your quote business in the streets. And literally, there was a point in time where if this type, mental health issues kind of got out in the open, like, they would come and get you and take our families away from us. Like, that literally happened. And so that trauma has been built up throughout our community for generations now. But obviously times are changing. Conversations like this are being had. Platforms like Alchemy are being developed and built. But we're in the very early stages of creating conversation. And that's just one part of the equation. Not only do we need to have the conversation, we need the resources, the people, the access. I mean, there's a long list of things that need to be done in order for us to really heal from our experiences, both collectively and individually. But there's no better time than now, because it seems like we've hit a reset button. 2020, I think, was a wake up call for everybody on a lot of different fronts. And if you left 2020 unscathed, particularly mentally, then, man, more power to you. But in some form or fashion, 2020, hit you in one way or the other, and woke us up to, like, how important mental well-being is.
Absolutely. And Todd,
I'm
is that
sorry.
you? Go ahead.
Yeah. No, but I think Ryan hit it on the head. I think a lot of the mental health issues that we have in our community started when we were young, especially as young Black males. A way to cope is crying. One of the first things you're taught as a young Black male is not to cry. And what that does for you is teaching you to hold these things in without some type of outlet. And then when you do you have a certain type of outburst. Now you consider this, and now we're Baker acting you. And like Ryan said, now we're taken away from the family because you're snatched away from doing something that you was told to do. So, the past traumas that we deal with as young Black males, is good to see platforms like this that are growing. I think, like Ryan said, again, it could be more, more resources, more things done for us to finally take that next step and start building from a younger generation, so they can start understanding and take the baton and start running with it, so we can keep it going.
Absolutely. I think we lost April, and I did have a question for April on this particular topic. Marcus, anything you want to add before I go to the next question?
Yeah, I just want to say I agree with everyone what they said, man. And I just think that trauma is passed down from generations to generations, and I think it started like way back, and people don't realize, like, as a people, we kind of had to just put everything on hush and not really talk about it. We always have to work twice as hard to get where we want to be in life. So it's always the mentality of, like, suck it up and and just keep it pushing. But now we have these platforms, and it's a lot of stuff that needs to be done. But at the same time, the first part is to have the conversation first, because when you have the conversation and you talk about it, and my brother is saying what he dealt with, and then Ryan is saying what he dealt with, and we start talking about what we deal with on a daily, now you have people who's watching that know they're not alone. Now they can feel like, man, this dude is dealing with that same thing. Because if we don't talk about it, then you really don't, you really do feel like you're alone. And that's where I was when I was playing. I was in that space, like, I felt like I was the only one dealing with anxiety and depression. I thought I was the only one dealing with that. So that's why I like using my voice to talk about it, because I know it, whether it affects one person or 5 people, I know somebody's listening and they take heed to, hey man, I'm feeling the same way.
Absolutely. And Marcus, I'm going to come back to you with this next question. But while I have April, question for you, April, as it pertains to the destigmatization of mental health. Can you hear me, April? I think you're on mute. Okay, there you go. I think you're on mute again. So, April, my question for you is, you mentioned earlier when you were introducing yourself, and you said, when I wake up in the morning, I have this vision, and you see things, and I don't want to repeat it, but you said what you see when every day. And your husband sometimes doesn't want to deal with that. So you're dealing with some destigmatizing in your own home. How do you navigate that when your spouse doesn't want to talk about that?
How I deal with it is, for one, I'm seeking therapy, and that kind of helps. But every day, I get text messages. Even before I wake up, I'm getting text messages with my friends and family. They're giving me beautiful quotes of today that kind of helps me go through. And while I'm trying to deal with it, I'm also trying to bring out what James is maybe going through, because James is really like, he's laid back. He's not too much of a talker. And so with him, I try to constantly ask him, is he okay? How is he doing? But I think his way of dealing with our son is that he has his own way of dealing with it. He sleeps with his son's pillow.
Mm-hmm.
Out of all the pillows in the house that we have, out of all the different bedrooms, he sleeps with his son's pillow every night. He will remove a pillow off the bed and put the pillow on the bed that his son has slept on. And he sleeps on that. So I think that kind of brings him comfort. He drinks out of this coffee mug that I went online and I created with all our son pictures on it. Because I don't drink coffee, but he does. So some mornings, I guess when he's really feeling it, he'll drink out of that coffee cup because it's loaded with pictures of nothing but our son. So he's dealing with it in his own way. But I really would like for him to talk about it, and he's just really not doing that. He says that he's okay with not seeking therapy, but I think you should. I think everybody seeks therapy in their own way, whether it's through an actual counselor or through a best friend or something in the nature that he's doing. So I'm kind of torn between the two, because I want to make sure that my husband's okay, because I know that with what I saw, I'm not okay, and I will never be okay. And with what he had to do, we both saw, I can't imagine not seeking help with what he had to do. Okay. Because unlike me, I just saw it.
Right. And April, I think you bring me to my next point, right? We see a person deteriorating, or we see a person that we believe should seek therapy, to seek something for their mental illness. And Marcus, now I want to come back to you, because you actually went through something. You experienced some trauma. You mentioned that you tried to take your own life. Marcus, if you could say something to those people out there that are listening, or a spouse of a former player, what is it that you would say? Because like April said, I want him to talk. He doesn't want to talk. What is some advice you would give that you could link to this conversation?
Well, what I would say is that um, sometimes you have to bring yourself down to their level, and you have to be able to relate to them, because a lot of times, especially being an African American, most therapists don't look like us, right? You might find a therapist that look like us, like really far in between, right? And the problem is that we don't necessarily feel like a therapist can relate to us in that way, right? And so sometimes you have to come down to their level and speak to them in a way, and kind of not like pry it out of them, but you take it step by step, day by day, because right now he might be saying that he doesn't want to do therapy, and that he think he can live without it, right? But at the same time, I think it's more so of you just being there for him and being supportive of him, and staying on top of his different triggers and what he does, like sleeping with a pillow, right? You pay attention to that. You pay attention to all of these things, and you're praying and trying to be hopeful that he will do something. Because at the end of the day, I think Ryan talked about it a little bit. Like you had like a bad situation with therapy, right? So therapy
Yep.
may not be the all in be all for him. He might can try meditating. He might can try talking to his wife. He might can try having someone that he can confide into, that is somebody that he trusts. Right. So that's what I would kind of say. I would just tell them to don't push it on it, because the more you push, the more they start to back up and fall back and fall away. And just relate to them, and be there for them, knowing that, all right, I'm going to pay attention to the different things that they may be doing, the different things that they may be going through. And I think for me, I just wanted
Yep.
someone to care. That's it. Like, I just want someone to feel like they care. Like, I had a wife at the time. Well, I ain't gonna say wife at the time. I have a wife now, but at the time, she was somebody that I talked to all the time.
Get it
But I
right.
didn't. Yeah, she was somebody that I talked to all the time, and that was something that I just didn't talk about. Like, I didn't speak about what I was dealing with, because at the
Mm,
end of the day, I really didn't know that that's what I was dealing with. We're not really educated or informed on what anxiety is or what depression is, right? Because we don't talk
absolutely.
we don't talk about it enough.
Absolutely. And so I'll go to Todrick. Todrick, I know right now you work as a mental health therapist for an organization called Just for Keep It Moving Clinical Services, right? What type of techniques or what type of strategy you would give when it comes to discussing mental health among our athletes, and among, with athletes, because we're a tough group, right? We on one end we have to stand firm and tall and confident. So some of our greatest strengths are our own weaknesses. So what are some strategies that you've seen based on your experience and being a mental health therapist currently?
Just like the rest of the fellas, the reason why I became a therapist was because of everything that I went through after the fact. And I think because I wanted to help so many of our other brothers that needed the help. So I think first thing you got to do is build trust, whoever you are, for that individual. If that individual can trust you enough to be able to confide in you about certain things, then that's when the relationship building starts. I had the pleasure of doing a session with a former player, just not even in the setting of the office, just us sitting down, smoking a cigar, talking. And those 15 minutes of conversation led him and his wife to go get help together. And, now he texts me, thank you for the conversation. We weren't friends before that, but now we have built a bond out of just conversation. So, I'm kind of like Marcus in the sense, if I could come to you and make you believe in yourself first, and then you'll believe into the process,
Absolutely.
because we don't know at times, like when the conversation somebody had with me, or you're depressed, you're going through this, you're going through that, I denied it. You don't know what you're talking about, pushing them away. I'm making them feel bad for trying to help me. And I think once I was at the lowest of the low, now I look at that person and I text them from time to time and tell them thank you for at least trying, even though it didn't work at that present moment. But because you took the effort to care, or you took the effort to see inside of me, you gave me the opportunity to help others. And I think another way is most of us use sports as a coping mechanism. So if they can find something to do, like go for a walk together, go bike riding, do something where your mind isn't always at a study thought process of whatever's going on. Try to do something that'll imitate the competitiveness, even if it's just fun. Go skating, trying to learn a new trade. Try to do something where it's occupying your mind, because the idle mind, we all know what come after that, you know? So if we can create the platform like Let's Talk, if we can have more players come on and allow them to express themselves to us first, and then we talk second, now we're giving them the opportunity to do things that they feel like they know they couldn't do. You know, like you're in the locker room with a room full of players, and out of those 50, 60 players, 45 of them are hurting inside. But because all we want to talk about is strip clubs and drinking and what kind of car you got, it's allowing them to keep hiding what's really going on, instead of the teams not necessarily forcing it, but providing more services for them, like making it more of a normalizing it in a sense, to where, okay, we got this going on today, we got that going on today, whereas now you're more comfortable with talking, because a lot of us are afraid of being judged, or, you know, are being handled the wrong way. So I think if you can keep that trust in that individual and allow them to express themselves to you, knowing that that's where it's going. And a lot of times we get in the conversation and we talk too much. That's another part of it. Sometimes people just want you to listen. And a lot of times when you have something to say back, they automatically shut down, because now you're like everybody else to them.
Right.
Like Ryan said, therapy isn't for everybody. The first therapist I went to, I thought she was horrible, but she may have been doing her job, you know, as far as trying to help me. But at that moment, it just wasn't working for me. So, you know, it's a lot of different techniques.
So Todrick, good point you just mentioned, right? You said therapy is not for everybody. How about this? Not every therapist is for everybody.
I agree.
So when I say that, I mean this. Ryan talks a lot about he had to find different therapists. He got to the point where he's created his own space. So Ryan, I want to talk about some of those labs. I want you to talk to me a little bit about waves. I did my research. I went to your page and I looked up some things. So I think when I'm thinking about April, thinking about her husband James, how could labs or waves empower him and transform him from feeling to healing?
Yeah, thanks. And you guys really hit on some important points. You know, just like life is not a one size fits all proposition, neither is caring for oneself. You know, I have different needs. We all have different needs, and we have to figure out what works best for us. And just because that's different, that's okay. But specifically, there were a few things that were mentioned that I want to briefly address. The cultural competency piece is really important. In my line of work now, I talk with clinical professionals on a daily basis, and I'm outsourcing and looking for people to come onto our platform to collaborate and create content, a lab, a wave with, etc. And I could tell you right now, the odds are not in our favor for that cultural competency piece. Less than 4% of clinical professionals are Black or of color. And for our community, that's a starting point, right? It's like, look, if I'm going to talk to somebody about this, and I want to talk to somebody who looks like me, because there's an understanding and a paradigm and belief that, hey, like, you'll probably get what I'm talking about. And I don't have to enter into the session to have to explain to you what I'm talking about and then try to work on, you know, do the work for therapy. I can't tell you the amount of times that I've had that conversation with people where, like, if I'm going to go do this, and a big part of destigmatizing mental health for our community is around representation and access, like accessible, cultural, competent providers. And so when I looked at it with that in mind, in my own experience, if you don't see something in the world that kind of fits what you got, what you need, then you go out and build it. And so that's what I'm doing with Alchemy Health, where we challenge the status quo and the norms, and obviously what is currently in existence. It's okay, let's put it that way, but there's a lot to be desired, specifically for our community. And when we look at the mental health spectrum of care, there's yoga, there's meditation, now there's Instagram memes, and then there's go see a therapist. And in between, there's a lot of access barriers. And it's really hard to go from like, all right, I tried yoga, I tried meditation. Now I got to go get in front of somebody. It's littered with access barriers. One, just the stigma around that. Two, therapy is expensive, right? One in-person therapy session can cost you at least $100. Finding a culturally competent provider is really difficult. Geographic barriers, the list goes on and on. And when we put all these into a bucket, these access barriers are compounded for our community particularly. And so at Alchemy, with a lab or with a wave, in live labs, et cetera, we seek to democratize and provide access to our community with culturally competent, on-demand mental health and self-care products that you could literally have at your disposal anytime you want it. And that's a big piece of it, is just around that access. Do we look to replace in-person therapy? Absolutely not. But we do realize that mental health is a journey, and across this journey, there's a huge gap in between where we need tips, we need tools, we need tactics, we need products that kind of help us work through what we're going through when we're not in front of a therapist, or when we're not in front of our friends, or something that helps us build up our courage and build up our knowledge base and build up our confidence so that we can take that next step. Because I could tell you for sure, like getting in front of a therapist is a really, really, really big step to take. And, we seek to empower and ultimately, again, provide those tips, tools, and tactics for you that help you. If you need to take that step, take it. But also, hopefully we could help you circumvent that and give you the access and the tools to provide consistent and steady self-care.
All right, man. I appreciate all that insight. You guys have provided some great insight. So April, I know you were in and out of getting off, and I know we all digital, so we have our digital technology issues. But April, question for you before I don't want to lose you. Are you there, April?
Yes.
So April,
I do.
Question for you guys, and you all can answer this question. Go ahead.
I will say this is that I think also with him is that he's so protective of me because he knows I am really, really going through more so probably than he is. So he doesn't want to add more stress on me because he knows exactly what I'm going through. So he's trying to lessen the burden or the pain that I'm going through. So he's more protective of me than himself.
Okay. Let me ask you all this, and you all can take this question. Have you seen change in how mental health is discussed among athletes and the actual sports leagues themselves, whether it's the NBA, the NFL? Have you all seen any change? And if so, what are some changes you've seen compared to when you were actually a player yourself?
Well, I would just say that the change is that they're talking about it a lot more now. And I don't know if it was COVID really did, like Ryan said, like COVID really did a lot of us. It really forced you to look at yourself in the mirror, it really forced you to sit down and really examine your life and yourself, right? But I think the change is just us talking about it. You see it more, you see more players coming out about it. now that are actually playing. They're talking about it now. I think Dak Prescott talked about it. And when you have those big names like that, like Hayden Hurst talking about it, it sparks some interest with other people. Now, the only difference is now we're in Mental Health Awareness Month, but can we keep this going even past that? And so that's the challenge, and with that. But I would say yes, it is a change, and it's a change that we have to keep preparing and doing.
Yeah,
And
I mean,
Marcus, just a little bit before I get off of that and go to you, Todrick. Marcus, I want to applaud you because you do the skill training, you do the one-on-one training. But what I like about what you do is you have a full slate of life coaching services. So you obviously it clicked, right? When you were thinking about taking your life, you thought about athletes and bridging that gap and bringing them together. So I do want to give you a shout out and kudos for that. And if you're in the Maryland area, Marcus, how can they find that facility and that program that you talk about?
Okay, well, we my gym or my facility is called A&M Sports and Fitness. It's in Upper Marlboro, Maryland, and it's a mental wellness sports facility. So I do the life coaching with the kids, and then we also teach them position specific training. And I'm actually Todrick. I'm actually thinking about going to back to school to get my therapist degree too as well. So I that's the route that I feel like that we're taking, because like Ryan said, like I think it's better when, not necessarily better, but people that look like us, when they're in that field, they're more inclined to go into the room, or even not even go into the room, maybe just go for a walk and just have a conversation, you know. But yeah, that's where you can
Absolutely,
find me.
absolutely. Okay, so Upper Marlboro, Maryland, man. All right, I might have to come check you out. But Todrick, you were about to address the question I asked about have you seen change in how mental health is discussed among our athletes today and even the league themselves. And you were about to add to that question.
yeah, because I'm a little older than most of the young fellas on the thing. So back in 2003, it was none of this. It was no mental health month. You know, it was no platforms for you to be able to talk to. So just to see this is powerful to me because it shows that people are trying. Now, the one thing that Marcus said that we have to do not only as the mental health aspect, but as an African American community in a whole, we got to stop taking low hanging fruit. Meaning, you get a month of mental health, but let's continue. I mean, things like this, you're able to make connections. So the five of us that's on this, we can collab on whatever we need to, and then hopefully it catches on. I mean, everybody on here has something different to offer, and I think that's the thing that we don't do. Like we create a platform, but we're the only ones that use it. Whereas if we stick together and everybody can share their story for us to be able to, you know, enlighten the younger generation. Like I love what Mark is doing. That's why I also became a school counselor in the urban area for that same reason. A lot of kids come in and they do speak to me, and the first thing they say is, "You're not such and such because of the color of your skin." So, you know, that lets me know that we're teaching our kids how to do the right thing. When they see, like you said, the LeBron Jameses, the Dak Prescotts, the bigger names, when they come out and speak on it, it gives the people that who feel like they don't have a voice a sense of power, a sense of encouragement in order to go out and say what they need to say. So what Ryan is doing is awesome as well. I know definitely down in South Florida, we could use both of y'all services because it doesn't seem like it's enough. This is sports heaven down here. So, we can start teaching our babies at a young age how to cope, how to speak, how to talk, how to, most importantly, have confidence in yourself as a African American youth. If we can start building that confidence in them at an early age, then we start the other side of the process of not only the mental health, but the self-care and everything else that goes with it. So, I think it's wonderful what the NBA and the NFL and all those things are doing, but it's going to take us that's on the ground level to keep this thing moving.
Cliff.
Okay, real quick, let's see if we got any questions on the call.
Yes, so we did have a question, and I just want to thank you guys. This is a really powerful conversation. As we've been talking about that younger generation and talking about mental health earlier, how do we encourage our collegiate athletes to utilize mental health services to kind of start that destigmatization even before they get to the NFL?
That's a good question. I think, and I'll take that first question, and then I'll let you guys jump into that. I think one, again, we gotta show them that there's a safe space to discuss your mental health. I think earlier, Marcus or Ryan, you all mentioned that in the locker room, or Todrick, in locker rooms that we've been in, you don't usually talk about anything of substance in a lot of times in the locker room, right? You're talking about, what did you do last night? Did you go out last night? You stay in? Oh, you just got a new car? You got this? When it comes time to have real, like, let's talk, normally guys want to have a one-off. Like, hey, bro, can I talk to you later? We don't have the same courage to speak in front of the group about some of our real problems and our real things that we're feeling. And so I think we got to create safe spaces and be intentional about those safe spaces. Maybe have mindfulness moments within the locker room. Maybe we have moments in the locker room where we all are meditating at the same time. We all are doing this at the same time. So it's not one or two different people being picked out of a group of 100 or 50 in just ways like that. And this lends to me to my next question, and you guys can pick that. What are the best ways to approach athletes, whether in college or in the NFL, when discussing mental health? What do you guys think?
I always go back to exposure. The sooner that you could get on a young man or a young woman's radar and expose them to what they can be, that's not like evidently in front of them, I always believe that that's the answer. And that's not only for like mental health, that's, for like career, like there's a world outside of your sport that you need to be exposed to and understand the possibility of what you can be. And that's externally again, but like internally, that exposure and saying like, look, a big part of, how your life unfolds is how you look at yourself and how you're dealing with the battle up here. And so exposing younger athletes, younger generations to, opportunities to meditate, really like breaking it down conceptually, having workshops, just kind of like a steady drip, if you will, of like tips, tools, experiences, tactics, etc., instead of, dumping it all on them in one swing, because you guys know like how the scheduling works. Like, all right, we'll do this. We'll check the box. We want to dump a lot on you to say that we did it. It's available. It's up to you to use it. It needs to be a more consistent process. There needs to be more consistent check-ins. There needs to be more engagement and touch points along the way. And instead of just saying, all right, we're going to have this big meeting around like health, wellness, and mental health. Here's a number. Reach out to this person if you need it, etc. All right, if you don't, cool, whatever. We have to stop that. And then in addition to what you had mentioned, Cliff, really that safe space. You guys know like the lack of trust for administration. Anybody who is not a player in that locker room is susceptible to like, I don't know if I should be talking to you about this. You know what I mean? Because you don't know where it's going to go. And that I think will be the biggest barrier. And so like, yes, teams are being proactive by bringing professionals in-house and employing them and making them available. But there still needs to be maybe it is a wall, but there still needs to be a few degrees of separation to clearly articulate and show signals to the players and the team that this person is here to help you, but they are not like in any way, shape, or form informing us of any conversations. They don't have an office here. Like, I think there needs to just be a very thoughtful and intentional and deliberate way in which mental health professionals are incorporated into teams.
I think what we can do
Absolutely.
too is kind of like the symposium. If we can put together something similar to that as far as mental health, I think, like you said, it's a trust thing. Whereas if I know administration is putting this person in his locker room to do this and do that would be received different if it was more so of a player initiated type of thing where it comes from someone like the NFLPA, or if the trust can put together a program where you do a tour of these different teams to provide these services. Because like Ryan spoke on earlier, a big part of what we go through is because we don't know what's going to happen next. And I think if we can expose them to more opportunities to where instead of one big meeting before you start your professional career, we need to have these meetings more often to build comfort within those players. So now you're not stuck by yourself after you did 5 years, 10 years, 2 years, however it goes. But I think that the more resources we have, not even, mental health wise, but to try to help prevent it from even getting to a point where now we're doing things that we really don't want to be doing at that moment. So, I think if the NFL can provide more of those type of services, I think more players will be more inclined on speaking, not only just to that individual, but to each other. Because once it become a thing and normalize in the locker room, I think it'll be much easier and we'll have much more success with our brothers transitioning out of the game.
Cliff, we had another question.
Okay.
And we posted it up. The talk about, at one point, suicide, we didn't really even hear about suicide in the Black community a lot, even though we probably knew it was there. It wasn't talked about, but we seem to see, seemingly there is an explosion that we see, especially in young Black males. For the panel, what do you think is behind the visibility of more Black people taking their own lives or seeing suicide as the only option?
I mean, I would say it's what we see on TV. A lot of it is the things that we see on TV that's happening to us. And I think that portrays like no hope. It gives us a sense of like we failed. It gives us a sense of we're scared to even walk outside. I just think that it went up because of all of the things that we've seen, and it's not just like you see it once or you see it twice. You see it all the time, and I know that I've thought sometimes like, dang man, like, is it ever going to get any better? Is like what's wrong? Like, is it something wrong with us? Like, and I think that's just what happens when it's that visible to you, and those things happen. Like things like about like George Floyd, and Breonna Taylor, like things that happen like that. I think it really scars us as a people, because even though we didn't know, like I went to the University of Louisville, I didn't know Breonna Taylor, but I felt like I did. Like I feel like she's my sister. Well, we're all brothers and sisters regardless. So I think someone that might not be as mentally strong or tough, they might not be able to see past that. They might see that as themselves and maybe feel like they're not worth anything. So I just feel like a lot of it is and it's just skyrocketed because of just what we've seen and how and think how things went, especially over the pandemic.
April, before you got back on, the question was, why has suicide in the Black community been more thought of, more talked about as of late, as opposed to maybe 5 years ago? What is your thought on the suicide being more talked about in the Black community? You have any thoughts on that?
Me personally, I think that it does need to be exercised more into the Black community, because now it's starting to be more prevalent. Just in the short span of hours, gotten connected to several wives or several whose children have literally committed suicide. And I mean, one story was, and I'm not naming, but her child did it in the same bedroom where her sister was sleeping. So when this young lady woke up, all she saw was her sister hanging. Another episode was this young lady, her child did it. She was on the phone with her best friend. Her best friend didn't even know what was going on, but she literally took her own life while two of her best friends were on the phone with her. They thought that she had fallen asleep because it was late, but it wasn't. What she really was doing was counting down the time frame it would take for her to perish while her friends were literally on the phone. They had no clue. They just thought when she stopped talking, she had fallen asleep. So it is, I mean, and then the night before our son, you know, I always, every morning, I will hug him, kiss him, tell him good morning, see if he wanted breakfast before I go on my way or whatever. Every night before he went to bed, I would hug him and kiss him and tell him good night. It didn't matter if he came in the house at 3, 4 o'clock in the morning from doing his video shoots, his music or whatever. I would hug him and tell him I love him because that was our routine. And he hugged me and told me he loved me back. And I asked him, did he want breakfast in the morning? And he said, yeah, that sounds good. And I said, are you okay? He said, I'm good. He said, I'm cool. I'm good. It's all good. I'm good. He just kept saying he was good.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I said, are you sure? He said, yeah, Mom.
I think April is freezing.
I'm
I think we lose April,
sure.
but April was mentioning some things, and she said you good and checking in and things like that. I was gonna wear this shirt, right? This, I'm a captain for the trust, and one couple years ago we had a mental health awareness event, and they gave us these shirts, and it was a group in DC, and they give out these shirts, and the question on the shirt is you good, and then on the back it talks about active minds. One thing I would say is the trust has done a good job with us as captains is that we all had to get suicide prevention training. We had to go to an organization that I know I had to go to Rutgers University and get in a training called Assist. And it was all about suicide. And so one of the tips I have for when we talking about suicide is don't be afraid to ask a person flat out, are you thinking about taking your life? I think sometimes that's hard for us to utter out of our mouth. And that's one thing that they taught us in that class is ask them straight out. Because in most cases, they don't want to take their life, but they don't have anywhere else to go with this built up loneliness or hopelessness or whatever they're feeling, and they don't have an outlet. And we all talked about trust, just like you, Ryan. I went through a divorce maybe, over 10 years ago. And that was my first bout with therapy. Because I live in Maryland, went to University of Maryland, all my family is in Pennsylvania. So when I went through my divorce, I was by myself. It was the first time I felt by myself. I didn't have my aunt's house to go to and sit on the couch and whine and cry and woe is me. I didn't have my mom to just drive up the street. Everybody was in Pennsylvania. And so it was the first time that I realized I needed a therapist. I needed somebody to just dump my stuff on. And so what happened was I went through actually 3 different therapists before I settled on the one that I chose. But the problem is this: I didn't give up on myself. I didn't quit. I knew what I needed. So it wasn't about the therapist. It was about, I just got to find the right one. This one didn't work. And it was all for different reasons. The first therapist, it was more about, I felt like she was using the textbook too much. I'm trying to have a conversation. I'm saying I'm gonna be a little bit late. She's like, "Don't have anxiety. Don't, you're gonna be okay." And I'm like, "I'm just telling you, I'm late. What are you talking about? Don't therapy me every minute. I'm not even on the couch yet." So it was one of those things that just turned me off about that person. And then I found my final therapist that I landed on, man, and she just really connected. I had some data to compare it to. I said, this therapist was this. So then I went to another one. What didn't I like about this therapist? And you have to have that data, right? And so when we're talking about mental health, man, I just want to, we're getting to the end of it, but I have one final question for you guys. What describe your personal story or experience with dealing with mental health. I know at the beginning you guys talked a little bit about it in your introduction, but if any of you want to go into a little depth about some of your personal story and what led you, what was the tipping point that led you to that therapist or led you to this field, if you want to speak to it.
Well, I know for me, growing up watching my dad do drugs and my mom being a young mom, I think what a lot of guys don't know is the depression starts early, but you find ways to manifest it. You find ways to allow it to grow over time. And I think football was a way for me to be able to use it as an outlet. So from 7 years old to 30 years old, this was my way of unleashing without violence, without doing anything to anybody. And so when that ride is over, it's like now you don't have that same coping mechanism. So a lot of things that you can normally brush off or run off or laugh about with your teammates in the locker room to take away from that pain, you don't have it no more. So what I tried to do, I tried to stay away from home because I knew if I came back to Fort Lauderdale, I knew everybody that cared about me would see me in this downward spiral. So I stayed away as long as I could. And once I didn't sign back, I ended up coming home. My girlfriend at the time was having our daughter. And so we came back. The reason why I brought her back home, because it was safer for her to be with family than it was for me at the time. And so I started drinking more. I started hanging out. Like, to be honest, life didn't even matter at that point. Whatever, days was nights, nights was days, Wednesday was Friday, Saturday was Monday. And it got to a point where I would look in the mirror and just see a blank screen. And so one day, my uncle called me from New York. My uncle, who has been through life itself, ended up becoming a pastor when he got out of prison. I don't know who called him. I don't know who said what, but my uncle called. He said, "Go to the airport, get on the plane, and I'll see you when you get here." In my mind, I'm like, I don't have nothing going on, no more football, no more this, no more that. The destruction that I had caused had already burnt almost every bridge that I had ever built. So now, like you said, for one of the few times in my life, I'm alone. I don't have anybody. I'm afraid to go to this person. I'm afraid to go to that person. But I know if I stay home, I know how this is going to end. It's either going to be dead or in jail. So it took me a couple of days. I had to think about it. I had to come to terms with myself about what was really going to happen. So, like you said, when I looked in my baby girl eyes and I seen something, I had to leave, because if I was going to be any worth to her or to my kids in general, I had to go, because if I didn't, then I wouldn't be here talking to you today. So when I went up there with my uncle, we had conversations, but like you said about the therapist, he was my first therapist because he didn't force the conversation on me. What he did was he made me comfortable with having conversation. So he made it okay for me to sit there and tell him what's going on or express to him what's going on without even saying a word. And so now that I have somebody that'll listen to me instead of talking to me about what's going on, it made it easier for me to, when he recommended the first therapist, that he recommended, we didn't connect. But the second therapist he recommended, we connect immediately, because again, it was more so of a let me hear you, or instead of let me talk to you type of situation. And I think if it wasn't for that, whoever called him, I mean, at 41, this was 15, a long time ago. So and just in that, with everything that was going on, I thank him all the time, because I I would have never recognized what depression looked like, because it was normal for me to be in that state of mind. It was normal for chaos to be the way you survive. And so when you get to a point of peace and you look back at all your life whirlwinds and you ask yourself, like, man, like, think about if you'd have handled that with a clear conscience or a clear mind on what you could have really done. One of the things that I did realize is that everybody's not made to play 15, 20 years in the NFL. Everybody's not meant to. But what you have to realize is you have to use the connections you make in order for you to be successful afterwards. And a lot of times those connections are few and far in between, you know, like Ryan said, because you're afraid to reach out to those people. Even after I have some podcasts that I do with a friend of mine, and some former players reached out to me and telling me their story. And it's just amazing how, you know, you could have had the same conversation with somebody who sat right next to you, and you didn't want to put your pressures on this person, and they didn't want to put their pressures on you. So, you know, that's when I realized mental health was real. But then I also realized that my journey to play in the NFL was my platform for me to get back to my community. It made me want to be more of not just Todd the football player, but I can go to him for these type of resources and to help our Black and brown kids understand that, you know, it's okay to cry. You know what I mean? It's okay to talk. It's
Right.
okay to do these things, because it's a way for us to build our self-confidence back in our community. If we can start young and allow them to lead the way, I think it'll be a beautiful thing. Hopefully in my lifetime, I can see certain things turn, but if
Right.
not,
Yeah.
hopefully the process is still going.
Well, God, I hate to keep rush this conversation, but as you know, being on social platforms, time gets away from us pretty quickly. It's after 6 o'clock, so I want us to just think about this. Can you guys leave me? Thanks, Pat Todrick, Marcus, Ryan, and April. Can you just leave me with one thought, one thought, and then how can people reach you if they want to continue that conversation with you offline? So I'll start with you, Marcus. If you can leave us one thought, and then how could someone reach you if they wanted to connect with you offline?
I would say, speak your truth, man. Tell the truth. Tell your truth. I think that's truly what sets us free. Um, that's what truly sets us free, man. Just speak your truth on what you've been dealing with, and find someone that you can confide into that doesn't force the issue on to you, but will allow you to speak some of the things that you want to speak. And you can find me. I'm on Instagram, Money Mark 91, Twitter, Marcus Smith II. And again, my mental wellness sports facility is in Upper Marlboro, Maryland, called A&M Sports and Fitness. And really appreciate you guys for having me.
Thanks, Marcus. Ryan, leave us with one thought, one word, and how can people find you, connect with you if they want to further the discussion with you?
Yep. Great to be with you all today. Really enjoy the conversation. My one thought is a healthy life starts with a healthy mind. I am Ryan G. Mundy on all social platforms. And then also, if you want to learn more about Alchemy Health, you feel free to visit our website. It's Alchemy, ALKEME health.com. And we are Alchemy Health on all social platforms as well. Thanks for having me.
All right, thank you. April, I know you mentioned earlier before on another call that you don't do social media, but April, how could wives and reach out to you if they just want to discuss, talk about some of these things? And what's one thought or one idea or suggestion you can give to some of the spouses out there who have former players that have some issues that they might want to address?
They can reach me through another wife, because I deal with 60, 65 wives once a month. I reach out to them once a month. And trust and believe, they know who I am. So if they need to talk, they can say, "Hey, how can I get in touch with April?" And another wife will definitely give them my phone number. I really try not to deal with social media too much because you have to be able to be in that protection mode of your NFL family, because some people, they have uneasy reasons to deal with them. And you want to keep the conversations that I have with the wives, I like to keep them private. I am not one to go out and run and tell it. So for me, privacy is everything, because that's what we need in the NFL as a family. Because you have to be mindful of who you talk to, what you say, what you do, how you do it, where you do it. Because if one thing gets out, then it's blown way out of proportion, or it causes more harm. So for me, that's the reason why I don't do social media. But anyone that knows my husband, anyone that knows me, anyone that they can also reach out to Janice, JJ.
Okay.
They can reach
Okay.
out
So
to
you
Mo.
okay with the trust? You're okay with us if
Yes,
someone reaches out? Okay. Perfect.
absolutely, 110%. I'm okay with that,
Appreciate that.
because I know it's
Yeah. Well, April, we got to go to the. I can't. I think you breaking up.
don't be
Oh, go ahead. I hear you.
afraid to
There you
get
go.
help.
Yeah. Well, I
Don't be
want to
afraid
thank
to
you.
ask for help, because it's out there. Even if, like you say, you go to a counselor that's not fit for you, you're not a glove and ball or bat and ball type of measure up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's other ones. It's so many out there. Even if you have to go through two or three or four to find it, because I myself got frustrated with the first one, and I was like, I was not going to go back. But just so happened I tried it again, and it's wonderful. So
All
for
right.
me, don't be afraid to get help. Don't be afraid to let someone know what you're going through, because we cannot read minds, but we can also heal hearts if we work together to help each other. Because it takes a
Perfect.
village to do and handle this mental health situation. One person, 10 people cannot do it alone. We have to do it together, put our minds together, put our resources together, help and support each and every one of us. And it does not just
Absolutely.
pertain to the players, it pertains to the wives, it pertains to the players' children. It goes on and on
Mm-hmm.
and on. If we
Well,
are a
April, I hate
family,
to cut you
as
off.
we say
I
we
know
are,
you can.
we need to
I hate
stick
to
to that.
cut you off, but I got to get to Todrick before because we're over time. So Todrick, I know you said your last word, but how can someone reach you if they need to reach you, whether they're in the South Florida or they just want to learn more about your therapist and things like that?
All right, so I have a mental health, I'm gonna say a nonprofit foundation called the Speakeasy Foundation. Speakeasy Foundation at gmail.com. On social media, Twitter, Todd Devoe, on Facebook, Todrick Devoe, and on Instagram, TFND.
Mm-hmm.
Again, thank you guys for having me. I know we short on time, but I really, really appreciate this opportunity.
All right. And I just want to say for any of the viewers that have any more questions, you can always put them in the chat. We'll still see them later and we can make sure we get those to our panelists. But as we close out, I'd like to remind you that we all live in a world and around individuals who act as if they got it all figured out. But when it comes to personal finances, intimate relationships, family dynamics, personal growth, physical health, emotional wellness, we are all a work in progress. We are not all figured it out. We need to lean on one another, just as April said, just as Marcus said. We need to lean on each other. And we're made for community. As human beings, we are not made to survive alone. We're made for community. We benefit by being there for each other. So asking for help does not make us weak, it makes us real. And there's one thing that we absolutely need, and it's real people to do life with. So I hope you all enjoyed this live stream event that was put on by the Trust. And I just want to say thanks to our panelists. Thanks to all the trust staff who put this together, and thanks for allowing me to moderate and share you guys' story. And I just want to leave with this. May you all go in peace. May you go in peace, and remember what the panelists said. Remember that safe space, that privacy, trust, and last and foremost, don't give up on yourself. If one therapist don't work, if one conversation don't work, find another person, find another therapist. Don't quit on you, because that's ultimately who you would be quitting on. So thank you all for joining us, and we look forward to maybe having this conversation again. So thank you all to the panelists for joining us.